Hi, I'm Eric.
And I'm Aurora.
This is the Family Retort.
We're bringing you our dinner side conversations.
All right. So today we are talking about drugs in America. And this topic is personal to me because I have a pretty strong stance on it.
I feel like this is one of those topics where we actually do kind of mostly agree on it for the
Yeah.
most part.
Yeah, I
And so we're gonna have fun kind of agreeing, but I'm gonna be super obnoxious discussing the semantics because that's really what everything
Oh
is because
no.
it is the semantics of legality. Like what is, well, there's like a difference between decriminalizing and legalizing, regulating and unregulating things, right? Because I'm like all for regulating and and legalizing it and stuff like that. And
Yeah.
why were things illegal? And things are illegal because people are addicts, but people can be addicts to everything and all of that. But drugs can be used for good, and a lot of the drugs that are illegal have so many positive benefits, which Eric has so many stories about,
Oh
which
yeah,
I
I've
want
got
to
a few
hear about.
stories. Um so I obviously I'm a libertarian and this one I take a very heavy libertarian view on it, and it's essentially I don't care what you use, you know. It's your body, you should get to choose what you do to it, right? So that
Right.
means it's pretty much free game to whatever. And while some people are like, "Oh my god, what about heroin? What about cocaine? What about all these crazy drugs?" It's like, well, here's the thing. You're an adult. You can make these decisions for yourself, right? And that's where I know a lot of people are kind of very like, "Oh my gosh. Oh, how could you think like that?" It's, well, again, you're an adult. Why can't you make these decisions yourself?
I feel like that's where informed consent comes in. Like, are you 18 without a fully formed prefrontal cortex, or are you, 25 and you know the risks and benefits of each specific drug that you're taking and how to take them safely? Because those are all different kinds of things, right? Like,
Well, I
and
mean, I've done some dumb things. I mean, look at the legal drugs though. Let's look at nicotine, right? That's horrible for you. Smoking cigarettes, horrible for you. They're doing crazy stuff with
well, I
outlawing.
mean, alcohol isn't great for you either.
I
And
Yeah, I was
I
getting
was
to that.
also, yeah, okay. I'll
But
let you finish then.
okay, so even like alcohol, yeah, you're right. It's a horribly addictive, and it destroys people's lives. True, you know, but I, to some extent, yes, there's a legal limit. Obviously, you shouldn't be driving high. You shouldn't be out. If you're doing it in the privacy of your own home, that's different, right? I've had a few drinks tonight. I enjoy my you know, my whiskey. So, it is what it is. But at the same time, demonizing and saying, "No, you shouldn't do that." Oh my god, that's, oh, we need to put you in jail for a, a lot of non-offensive crimes, especially when regards to weed and even, I believe, to some extent, psychedelics, right?
Right.
I don't think this is harming people personally. There is some drugs, of course, that do harm people. Um, I recently watched a TikTok video where somebody was saying they need to remove fentanyl from the streets because it is hurting people so bad.
Well, here's the thing is there is actually a lot of hype about how bad fentanyl is, but like you do need to make sure that that's why it's important to have drugs to be regulated and to have it clearly labeled and to have informed consent about what's in the drugs you're taking. That's why we need drugs to be legalized, right? Instead
Yeah,
of instead of just decriminalized maybe, or instead of making them illegal, because when they're illegal, you do get things like fentanyl in them, but also there's a lot of hype about how bad fentanyl is when just touching them isn't going to do anything. You have to ingest a lot of fentanyl for it to be doing bad things to
Well,
you.
okay. I'm gonna correct you on that. It actually takes very little fentanyl to kill somebody. It it's a pretty scary drug, and they're lacing it in everything. But it comes into, well, if you
Why are they
have,
lacing it and everything?
because it's super addictive.
Oh, I see.
So it's like, oh, I did meth. Well, now it's laced with fentanyl. Now I'm even more addicted. But okay, so going back to this TikTok video I saw where he was saying like, you know what? I
I'm just giggling about how terrible you think TikTok is, and now you're referencing a TikTok video.
well, okay, it wasn't
I'm
technically a
sorry, it's
TikTok.
just funny.
It was a
It was
Facebook
like
short.
reposted on Facebook, right?
Yeah, but he was talking about how, you know, crackheads were better than fentanyl users because sure, crack is bad, but you never saw somebody dying from using too much crack.
It's not true.
It's trust me, way more people die from fentanyl. It is true.
I bet. I bet. I
But the
bet a lot of our drugs are stronger now. Just like people are always talking about how weed is so much stronger now, because if you go
yeah,
to the weed store, right,
dispensaries.
our weed, for example, like our weed is not our parents' weed, is because now people have so much access to weed that the weed store
It's a
is,
big business.
well, here's the thing is, the people who use weed, they smoke weed all day, every day, so their tolerance is extremely high. It's not this like low level stems
Um,
and whatever shit grows type thing. It's like a very concentrated substance now.
I
It's
I
been
wouldn't
bred for that.
I wouldn't 100% agree with that. I think most of the people are casual users. Um,
Well,
yes,
but they smoke much more than our previous generation did because they have much more access to it. I had a friend who, she used to smoke all of the time. She had to take a break to like deacclimate her body. I know multiple people who smoke a lot. I know a lot of people who are in chronic pain who smoke all of the time to manage it. It
yeah.
is, there are various different things about that. And this is not like, I'm not fear mongering about this. This is just like, hey, like if you're going into this, you have to know that the weed that is sold at dispensaries can be considerably strong. So that's something you have to
Well,
take into
okay.
consideration, and
Here
that your tolerance builds up to it. So people who
here's
smoke regularly have a higher tolerance. That's just like alcohol, right?
yeah.
It's like knowing what a 40 proof alcohol is versus like a beer versus like a like out vodka. That's all I'm saying,
Fair
right?
enough. I yeah, I can see that. The other thing you got to kind of consider too is a lot of people aren't like hardcore stoners, right? So I it's legal here in California. Fair warning. This is where I'm coming from. I live in
Right.
California. It's completely legal, right? So I can just go to a dispensary, get whatever the hell I want, and be it. I hate the taste. I don't like smoking. So this kind of screws me over. I don't really have many options. There is something I found that I do like. It is a measured amount in pill form. So you take one pill, you know exactly how much you're taking. You know it's very quantifiable, if that makes sense.
Are we talking about a different drug that you prefer, or are we talking about
No, this is so
weed?
it's THC. It's the active ingredient in weed.
Oh, okay.
So I found that this because I hate the taste. I think gummies taste utterly nasty and they make me want to gag. And I can't smoke because I hate inhaling like that. I have asthma.
You have bad lungs,
Yeah,
right?
I have bad
You
lungs.
can't fuck your shit up like that.
So for me, it's a measured amount, so I know exactly how I'm going to feel when I take this is perfect, right?
Right.
Very rarely do I actually do this. Um, but I'm more in the camp of psychedelics, right? specifically
Right.
mushrooms. LSD is a little bit more upper tier kind of, um, but
I feel like mushrooms are very en vogue, like as just a thing in general, like mushroom decor is in, but also like mushrooms in general, they've become much more mainstream. I know a few people who like have enjoy experimenting with it,
yeah,
like once a quarter they take mushrooms to have
yeah.
like this transcendent experience. It's not like, but mushrooms aren't something that you do like just to get by on life. They're not a coping mechanism. They're
Well,
like a
okay. So yes and no. Um, I'm going to go back to Reagan eras because there's a little bit of history involved with this, and it's actually fascinating if you really look into it, right? So Reagan was the start of the war on drugs. Up to
for
that point,
racist reasons.
well, there's a little bit more than just racist reasons, but yes, if you want to go into it, we'll go into that for another day.
Oh, no, no. I was just making a side note. Keep going with your story. I'm listening.
Fair enough. So Reagan basically started the war on drugs, right? That involved any kind of research, any kind of use, any kind of anything. It's just drugs are bad. You're a horrible person. You're getting put in jail. Well, specifically mushrooms and the active ingredient psilocybin was being explored as a remedy to depression, anxiety, and some other mental health illnesses. But because Reagan just banned, outlawed everything, and put pretty ridiculous penalties for that research stopped. And they had some pretty good research up to that point. And they went, well, shit, now we're screwed. We can't do any kind of mental health research on this. And I think, you know, that's a real shame because mental health is, I feel like, lagging behind our normal healthcare system by quite a few years.
It definitely is, and you, you're very correct in that our banning of certain segments of different chemicals and the exploration of that means that we have cut off so many different avenues to
Yeah.
explore improvements for our mental health. For example, like some people, there are finally just now, treatments. The idea of there's some research on ketamine treatments to treat PTSD, and then the government
Yep.
shut that down. And you have a
Yep.
lot of soldiers that are like, I'm going to kill myself if I'm not, like, I have such severe PTSD that if I'm not getting treatment, like, I'm a danger to myself and others. And they're
Well,
cutting off the only treatment
yeah.
that worked for me, which was this ketamine treatment.
Yeah.
And I think that that's obscene.
So here's the thing.
Like,
In
I know
in
people who have treatment resistant depression, and they are like, I mean, our mental health care system is just so, it's so
it's
archaic.
yeah. So here's the interesting thing though. In recent years, as we've decriminalized and then made illegal different kind of drugs, weed being the easy obvious one, but we've decriminalized, you know, mushrooms and some psychedelics. It's complicated. I'm not going to get into it, but that's opened the door up for research into these things because they've seen what happened way back and they're like, this is great. We need to look into it. And that, you know, has kind of transformed into microdosing and some other stuff. And what um, psilocybin, specifically related to mushrooms, researchers have found was that it repairs and promotes growth of brain cells.
Well, it helps like create new neurons, new developmental pathways. So it basically, as you get older, your brain prunes, and sometimes that pruning, that synaptic pruning, isn't always optimal or like healthy, and so it
Well,
can
yeah.
so you can well, then it allows you a new pathway to prune. So
Well,
let's
not
say you're
just
very
not just
depressed,
that, but it grows inactive pathways in your brain that were dormant, if that makes sense too. So it does a lot. And that's kind of why researchers are looking so into this, because they found that, you know, with terminal depression, people who are terminally ill, stuff like this, they've used low doses of the psilocybin, and it's helped with mood, not just artificially like boosting your mood, but actually building those neural pathways, like fixing your brain essentially. And it's a shame that we couldn't have done that,
20
years
years ago.
before this point. So I firmly believe like mushrooms are um, revolutionary drug in their own right, and they need to be studied more. And I've done mushrooms. Oh my god. Um, and I've done between a little bit and way too much. But I've never had a horrible experience.
I actually totally want to hear more about that, but I do want to say on the flip side of that, you're seeing after the opioid epidemic, people cracking down on the prescriptions of opioids. And you're seeing a lot of people who have chronic pain no longer having access to things that help with their chronic pain. So you have a lot of people who have chronic pain either left in endless pain or killing themselves because they don't have access to treatment anymore because of that. And that's like the opposite side of that.
Well,
So as we're
okay.
expanding one treatment option, we're cutting off others. And so when we're talking about legalization of drugs and prescription drugs and illegal drugs, these are all these different multifaceted layers. And that's why things require nuance, right? Like they never should have pushed the opioid. Like, why did doctors push the opioid epidemic? For profit? And the pharmaceutical companies should have paid for that. But
Well, okay.
instead, who is being paid for that are like paying patients,
Here's
people
the
who have
interesting thing.
neurological pain.
I want to interject really quick. I agree. Um, Opiates are pretty dangerous in their own
They
right.
super are. I totally agree.
Here's the interesting thing, though. I've known and have heard many stories where ketamine has helped people with that opiate addiction to remove themselves from that. And I don't know how to explain it. It's like I'm horribly addicted to heroin, but then I started ketamine, right? And it helped me overcome that addiction. And then I can get off of ketamine because it's a non really addictive drug, right?
Interesting. I think the discussion of like addiction is a totally different facet than just legalization of drugs because there's like the people because here's the thing is you are talking from like a mental health aspect of this and like to me I am a chronically ill person and the majority of my friends are people who also have chronic illnesses and are in chronic pain. And so when we talk about drugs, legal and illegal, a lot of people I know are self-medicating with weed or other drugs to manage chronic pain that they don't have either they don't have a doctor that will help them with their pain or there isn't real pain options for them in western medicine. And so like either they don't have access to it or it doesn't exist. And or sometimes we just or these other medicines just work better for them. So there is the like for me, my experience of drugs is largely on the necessity
Yeah.
self-treatment side,
And
right?
and that's why I think legalizing kind of a blanket everything is beneficial, right?
I agree, but I think that when we talk about legalizing, we have to think about what are the consequences of this, right? Because people are always complaining about all these addicts on the street in XYZ.
Okay.
And I personally don't, I feel like when we get into that, that's a whole different discussion of like addicts and this and that. And the question is like, how much other responsibility do we have to addiction? And the thing is, addiction is people who need help for other things. Like there's pretty clear stories that the people who are addicts have problems that they need help with, and that's why they become addicts.
So
So if we help people,
he,
they wouldn't be addicts theoretically.
here's the thing. I'm going to play devil's advocate a little bit. Not quite, but just hear me out. So, okay, you're saying like, okay, we have problems with people who are addicts, uh, and you know, or we have problems with addiction, right?
Well, I just don't. I mean, I think that we should have everything be like have access. I just don't think it should be like a free for all, if that makes sense. Like, I think we should have everything be legal and accessible within some constraints. There needs to be some level of some barriers to some
Well,
things, depending on how harmful they are.
true. So
Right? Like,
here's the thing. So an addict, right? They're already addicted to, let's say, meth, right? Sure. They're going to find meth regardless of where it comes from. But in doing so, if you have, we'll say, a sanctioned dispensary where you can go and say, hey, this is pure, it's not cut with anything else. We have a license for this. You can trust us. They know exactly what they're getting. They're not getting drugs that are cut with fentanyl. They're not getting drugs that are impure that could kill them. They are, you know, getting exactly what they're essentially paying for. And granted, some people disagree with that, saying, well, you shouldn't even be giving them meth in the first place. But regardless of that fact, they're going to find it. They're going to get it no matter what.
well, you're talking about like safe use sites, aren't you?
Not necessarily safe use. I would say take a step further and say, I don't want to say sanctioned dispensaries for meth, but
No, I feel like
legitimate,
I
reputable places where they can go and get their drug of
I
choice.
I
It,
think you kind of are, and I'm in support of that. I think that that's a great way because,
you know, a lot of
but
people will
here's what
say
I'm
it's
saying is
terrible.
what you're saying is specifically these are sanctioned, deliberate places where it's clear labeled what's in it and how it's
Yeah,
done, and it's like authorized places.
yeah,
That's very different from a drug free for all, right?
yeah.
And
So,
that's what regulation
yeah,
is being like, well, this is what's specifically in this, and who regulates that? How
like,
do you know?
look, we have a license for this. We got signed off by whatever, government agency. We had to jump through a ton of hoops for this, right? But you know what you're buying, and you're a consenting adult. It's not my place to tell you what to do with your body. If you want to die of a heroin overdose, you know what? You should have been more careful. I'm sorry. And I'm
Well, I agree, and that's the importance of harm reduction, right? It's having these safe types of places versus having just anything in any pill, just have it in, you don't even know, and it's in a pill that
exactly.
you like, and it's a random bottle, it's called like teeny boppers, and it's in a vending machine of a club, right?
Right.
You don't know what's in those pills. It could be Molly, it could be like it could be
Yeah,
like some crazy shit you don't know
exactly.
in the gas station bathroom. Like, who knows?
And then
Like,
that pretty much,
those are the different levels of regulation that we're imagining, and that's what I'm advocating for. Is
yeah,
well, we need to have things very clearly regulated, and the more intense something is, like, sure, people can maybe grow their own weed in their own backyard, but I don't know, maybe you can't sell your own weed
yeah. It's
unless you
you're
have
right.
like a license to
In
show that you don't use any pesticides and you have this and you know what
That's
amount of THC in it, and you
exactly
have to
what they
like
do in
find the amount.
California. That's exactly
Yeah.
what they do in California. You're allowed up to X plants. I don't know the exact details because weed is not really my cup of tea. But this is also coming from. Keep in mind, I I had a friend who died from heroin use. Right,
That
a
must have
very
been very
it was incredibly hard, and a lot of my friends came together, and we were just kind of like, how did this happen? I talked to a ex-girlfriend who was they ended on good terms and they were very close friends for years after the fact, right? And I talked to her for a little bit and I was like, how did this happen? Like, what I don't understand. I knew, he did some, you know, periphery drugs, weed, mushrooms, LSD, maybe ecstasy on a few times, but we never really knew he used hard stuff like heroin. And she explained it to me like, he did at one point, but it wasn't really like excessive, right? He wasn't addicted to it, which was good, but what had happened was he hadn't used it for very, very many years.
Oh, and he didn't adjust his
Yep.
dosage.
And he didn't adjust his dosage.
That's like how
And,
this is the stupidest algorithm.
well,
Like I
here,
used to snowboard, like I used to mountain board, and
well,
I
hold
was
on.
like, okay, I'll let you
There,
finish.
there's a little bit more to it. And they think that the heroin he got was purer than what he used to be familiar with,
Oh,
right? So he OD'd essentially because he thought that it wasn't as pure where he could handle the lower impurity, if that makes sense, or it was cut with something else. But in
yeah.
fact, it wasn't. So essentially, he OD'd. So because there was no kind of regulation, there was no, hey, this is X percent, this is 60%. I don't use heroin, so I don't know. But like, if you have a label on it, like this is only 20% pure, this is only 80% pure. Hey, you need to be careful. This is 60%. This is 100%,
Or if it's
right?
cut with like, or if it's like a mixed drink, right, where you have it,
Yeah.
or like a coffee. I mean, this is how I feel about, for example, we are so unregulated caffeine. Caffeine's in fucking everything.
Oh yeah,
Caffeine
caffeine is
fucks me up
so bad
so
for you.
bad. It's in everything, and it's not like labeled clearly in the front of anything at all. Like
No.
I accidentally drink stuff and it has fucking caffeine and fucks me up for days. And I'm just like shaking, jittering, can't sleep, have a migraine for fucking days. It's the worst. And it's just like not anything. Like I can't even drink anything. Like I can't look. I have like if I want to go get boba tea, that has black tea in it. Even
Yep.
that has caffeine.
Yeah.
Everything has caffeine. But for example, a dirty chai latte, you know that is a chai latte, which is has the caffeine and has like an espresso shot in it. That's how you know. So if you wanted to have heroin that has some sort of cut with XYZ, you could have it in the form of labeled as a mixed drink where these drinks
Exactly.
are
So
labeled
you
X amount of wine, X like a beer with a shot of vodka in it or something. I don't know.
yeah.
Crazy shit.
No. So you know what you need to be more careful, you need to use less so you know how you interact with it. And then there's things that's just like it it would help if it was clearly labeled. And dealers and, the people who are selling these drugs aren't going to do that, right? You're never going to find a clear-cut answer.
Well, I heard a story about a woman who actually she was a drug addict and she was dealing to somebody and she gave a call to somebody being like, hey, I think what I sold you was laced with something, maybe don't take that. And that guy OD'd and died and she was convicted
Yeah.
because she tried to warn him. So our system that makes it illegal actually criminalizes people more for trying to do the good thing and look out for their customers.
Yeah.
So that's the kind of system we have where even if somebody wanted to, right? Even if they wanted to check up on their customers or whatever, you're actually like worse off for that. So you're more likely to go to jail if you try to call like to follow up to, you know what I mean?
Yeah, no,
If you
I
find out
get
something.
it.
So I think that says something about how a reverse incentive in our legalization system by making things illegal, we actually make it even more difficult for people who are dealing illegally to look out for their customers because it is a bad business model for your customers to be crazy addicted and homeless. It is a bad business model for
Yeah.
your customers to die because the ideal business model is what nicotine, alcohol, and caffeine does. Starbucks is the ideal addiction model, right?
Oh yeah.
If you think about it, right?
Pretty
It's
much.
And that's what small-time dealers, like, if they had the option, would choose to do when people become crazy addicts like that. I mean, sure, I'm
They're
sure some
more
people are
up
scummy.
to shady dealings and like I said, the fentanyl is horrific. That is, I think, the number one drug to watch out for because
I mean, look,
it's like a grain of rice and you'll die. It's insane how much it's even less. I believe it's less than that.
I mean,
It's
cigarettes knew
such
they
a
could
small.
kill you and specifically deliberately sold to children who couldn't think clearly and didn't understand, right? So,
True.
like, so evil is evil, but, and so there are lots of exploitative business practices, but when it comes to illegal drug dealers, making things illegal actually doesn't, it makes their business practice worse versus allowing them to be a more sustainable business, which would be less evil in some ways. It would allow for more regulation if it was legal. It would allow for people to look out for their customers more, and it would allow for people who just want to have a good time every once in a while to have all the checks and balances, to have full knowledge and full support. When you make things illegal, you don't know where things are going, and when things are legal, you can know how much is in what, and you can make a fully informed decision, which you can't when things are illegal. You don't know where things are
Yeah,
coming.
yeah, and then it's kind of more like opportunity versus, oh, hey, we can just go down to the corner market and get a bag of mushrooms, right?
Right.
Um,
The importance of transparency and the less of the thrill of doing something illegal, which I'm sure for some people is part of the fun, but
okay. So, with that being said, um, have you had any experiences with, we'll say, legal or not legal drugs in the
so
past?
here's the thing is I live in Washington where weed is legal, and there are people who have dispensaries and people who can have street illegal things. And I had this great idea. I was like, all right, I'm going to host things. We're going to have edibles and watch Miyazaki movies and have a grand old time.
Oh, that sounds like
So
fun.
I had friends, and one friend brought dispensary gummies and snacks, and I had another friend who bought just random underground bakery weed stuff. And guess which one I had?
The not calculated amount and had a miserable time.
That absolutely. It didn't hit. It didn't hit. It was like 2 hours. I just took a little bit. It didn't hit. And then I had just a little bit more. And then, and then it hit all at once. Reality was zooming in and out. I threw up. I had to lie down the whole
Oh no,
shebang.
yeah, no, that sounds about right. It's too funny.
Uh,
So
so
I
So
I've
this is why I'm so extremely pro. We need things to be regulated distinctly so you know exactly how
yeah.
much everything is. That's why I'm not like, let's not have a free because
Well,
I've had such
that's
a bad personal experience where I think, well, you know what? Like, if you just want to play Russian roulette like that, like that's your choice, but like that's not my choice. And I think that you should get to have full transparency, know what every single gram is in everything, and
yeah.
that's why I'm so
Labeled.
for
You want it
specifically.
labeled. You want it like,
Yeah,
oh, if I eat this, it's going to be this, so I know I will be on the floor regretting my life decisions. or
that's why I'm
uh,
so specifically for regulation.
or
And
alternatively, it's like, oh, well, this is whatever. It's like 3 milligrams of THC. I know that's not going to affect me very much. I'm going to have a good time. I'm going to be maybe laughing and a little hungry, get the munchies, and that's it. And that's why I like the measured pills. Uh, I, I I don't mind the gummies, but I just think they taste disgusting. It's just a personal preference. That's all.
I honestly, when we first moved to Seattle, I thought that there was just like skunks out a lot.
Oh, nope.
Well,
That's
when I lived in Iowa, right, that only smelled like that when we ran over a skunk. I imagined in the car, like so I just imagined that there's a lot of skunks around, and it was just
Oh my gosh.
people.
Yeah, too funny. That's
And I
funny.
was like, "There's a lot of skunks at Bumbershoot," and somebody's like, "This is a weed smell, Aurora," and I'm like, "I see."
Yeah, skunk skull is more acidic. So another thing I've done, and I want to put it in context for you. So mushrooms go off of dosage, right? You know, 1 gram is a decent amount. That's about a normal trip, right? Then they have things called heroic doses, which is around 5 grams. So that's 5 times the normal amount of mushroom psilocybin. Um,
Hmm.
I've done 15 grams.
Jesus, I can't believe your brain isn't fried.
Well, here is the fun thing.
Mega genius brain, right? New
Well,
new brain cells.
all right. So here's the thing. I was curious, and I have a very
Have you
scientific brain. I have a
have
very
you watched?
scientific brain.
Okay, hold on a pause. Have you
Okay.
watched the new Invincible?
Yes, I love that show. It's
Do
great.
you know the guy with the extra brain where he combined all those guys' brains and he just has all that brain all down his back?
Yeah, yeah.
That that mega genius brain from
Not quite.
brain
I
pops. All right, I'm
I
sorry. I'll let you finish your story.
I will say I do not recommend it for everybody. It is not advised. Do not do it. It could either enlighten you or destroy your life. Uh, I'm not even kidding you. It could really fuck you up, or you could have.
Do you really feel like it changed your life? Like that kind of doses changed your life to such
So
a degree?
I I'm gonna save that question for after the fact.
Okay.
So I've used a few mushrooms a few times up to that. Um, I grow my own. Used to. I don't really do it much anymore, but it's easy. And I'm not going to get into how to do it. You can look that up online. You can get the stuff yourself. But 15 grams is insane amount. So it
I have a question. How many times previously have you tried mushrooms before you took this big of a dose?
um 6 or 7.
Okay, so clearly you like have experimented and you experimented with your tolerance and other
Yeah,
stuff like that too.
and various levels of it too. So like I did 5, and then I did like 1, maybe 2. So I knew what I was getting into, right?
So were you really trying to have this kind of like ep epiphany like experience? Is
It,
that what you were trying to aim for?
in a way, yes. It
Okay,
was
I'm sorry.
more like I've heard stories, and until you've experienced it yourself, you don't understand how it is, if that makes sense. Like I can describe it to you, but going through it is completely different.
And what you weren't getting that with even the 5 heroic
No,
dose.
I mean I was to some extent. Um the best way I can describe it is sometimes you'll get into these thought loops, and you will confront things in your mind that you don't want to think about. But in doing so will make you a better person in the long run, if that
Okay.
makes sense. One of the things, this was a different trip that I addressed in my brain, if that makes sense, was my own laziness. And I have ADD, I have all these other things, but a lot of times I use that as an excuse not to do things, which is completely valid. And it goes, you think about these things and it just pops in your brain, and it goes, you know, boom. All right, we're going to talk about why you're so lazy. And it doesn't matter what you want to do. If you want to talk about it or not, you need to go with it, because if you don't, you're going to have a really bad time.
Interesting.
It's like you're taking your brain to some extent and your thoughts and giving it to I don't really want to say an entity because it's a some people see entities, some people don't, some people do, but you're taking a part of your brain and saying, "All right, you have the reins. What are we going to talk about?" And then it goes, "All right, let's address your laziness." And then you get into these thought loops where it's, "Why are you this way?" Well, I'm this way because I'm tired, I'm depressed. I was like, this, and this reason. Okay, well, those are all excuses. Why are you like this? Well, I don't know. I thought those were good, valid reasons. Not good enough. Why are you like this? And then it just hammers you and hammers you. This is, uh, I wouldn't necessarily say a bad trip, but something that happened to me on one of my experiences where it just kind of evolves and keeps going and keeps going and it keeps going, and it really makes you address to the root cause or the root problem, whether you want to face it or not. It doesn't fucking matter. It'll just keep going. It'll keep going and keep going. And it's like, well, I, I I'm lazy because I'm tired. I'm just not physically there. And then something will pop in your head like, well, you know what? If you keep on doing things, your body will catch up. Your physical body will catch up. It always will. It's just like working out. And then it it's weird because it just kind of, I don't know if you've ever had one of those things that just kind of clicks for you where you're just
Mm-hmm.
like, "Oh, I get it now." That was something that just kind of clicked for me, and it was like, "Oh, my body will catch up." I was like, even though I'm tired, if I do X, Y, and Z, over and over and over, and just get off the couch, if I just go do the dishes, if I just go do whatever, even though I may be tired, exhausted, my body will catch up, if that makes sense.
Right.
I know it's weird, but that was one of them. But that wasn't
Well, I
the
think
one.
one for me was that I was always like, oh, why didn't I do this? I'm like, well, I was so scared of being tired and burnt out. And it's like, well, I'm always going to be tired and burnt out. I might as well do the thing I
Yeah,
enjoy and pay the price
exactly.
anyways.
Exactly. It's just like, well, you know, for you, it would be like, okay, well, I can rest later. Why don't I go out now, do the things I want to do, and then
It's like I'm always going to be in
I'm
pain
gonna
and
be
have a
tired
flare
no
up.
matter what, right? That's
Yeah.
it kind of, if you're familiar with fractals, the
Mm.
best way I can describe it is your brain becomes a fractal, where it kind of does this loop where it keeps looping and it keeps going down, where it's not necessarily the same loop, but it goes into like, it just keeps going and going and going and going and going, right? Um, so when I did 15 grams, it started off relatively normal. I was like, oh, okay. And then it kind of died down, right? And I was like, oh, well, I thought this was going to be, revolutionary. I didn't realize that this was going to be crazy. This was kind of just a normal dose of 3 to 4 to 5 grams. This wasn't like 15 grams worth. So it's like 10 o'clock at night. I get into bed. I'm like, okay. And then something clicks in my brain where it's just like, oh man, I'm feeling a little weird. Okay. And this is after I thought everything had calmed down and I was done for the day. Sure enough, it said, motherfucker, it's just getting started. Um, so I was like, oh, all right, you know, weird stuff started happening, and with psilocybin, it's you're gonna see visuals, you're gonna see like wavy lines going on the walls. I was at the point where my hand, I could, the best way I could describe it is I could see the past, present, and future all at the same time, moving it. So like I saw my
Interesting.
hand from like a littler hand, I would move it and then it would go to like a skeleton. It didn't freak me out though.
Interesting.
And then it was just like, whoa, that's weird. And I was like, oh shit. Oh man, it's hitting me full force right now, isn't it? So
How
obviously,
how long after did you when you started taking it did it start hitting you like that?
this is hours afterwards. I thought I was done.
So in a normal dose, you would have been done by then.
Yeah, pretty much. I would have fallen out. This is like 5 or 6 hours later. It's so psilocybin's kind of weird because it's based off of your like um ability to process it and your what's the word I'm looking for?
Metabolism?
Yeah, your metabolism. There is ways of like adjusting things so you can take it with like lemon juice and it'll become more powerful but shorter and stuff like that. But I just did it normally. I made some tea. I added way too much mushrooms, and then that's how I did it. But I was like, okay, I need to go downstairs. I don't want to wake up my partner. Okay, so I go downstairs, and then it just kind of throttles up to 112, and then 120, and then 130. So it it was truly interesting. And like I said, I have a very scientific mind. I take things from very analytical perspective. This was absolute insanity. And, I'm not so much like, oh, I felt X, Y, and Z, right? That's just not how I am.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like a lot of people are like that too, especially, we'll say males are, you know, but there was a void that I saw in the room. It reminded me of a black hole just in the middle of my room. And I was like, okay, maybe I should play some YouTube videos to, distract my mind, you know. And then a thought just popped in before I even touched the remote. It's, you've already seen all the YouTube videos ever. And then it just started flashing every single thing I could remember, YouTube video, everything I've seen. It just
Oh wow.
in a second, and it's just like a compressed video, a compressed file inserted in my brain, and it just went click, boom. Here's
So you've
everything
already
you've
seen
already
all of
seen.
YouTube.
Yep. And then I went, okay, maybe that's not a good idea. I put down the remote. It don't if this is my heads up for anybody who does mushrooms or LSD or any kind of psychedelics, don't ever fight it. If you fight your trip, you are going to have a bad time. So I went, okay, not a good idea. Put it down. And then I just kicked the chair back and went, all right, wherever you're going to fucking take me, let's go. The next thing, it, keep in mind, this is hard to describe, was something. And the best way I can describe it was a sense of, you're not supposed to be here, but I will protect you from what is out there. Kind
Interesting.
and it was a feeling, it was thoughts, it was more than just, oh, ha, ha, kind of feeling. And I I described it as I have seen God's big toe and it protected me
Interesting.
cuz I felt like there was more to things, but at the same time there was something blocking the evilness, the disgusting side of things, the maybe the nasty things. And I also said had it, like I said, it was more of a feeling than an actual like
So
thing,
you feel like
right?
something shielded you from almost the idea of having a bad trip.
Yeah, in a way. And it made me reflect on what's important to my life. That is, you know, my family, my friends, you know, my home, what I have. Like, I have a car, I have a nice car, right? I have people who respect me, I have people who I respect. And it put things in perspective that, you know, I feel people don't get enough of.
Interesting.
And it made me value those things. Ex- I don't even want to say a little bit more. I would say exponentially more than what I used to.
Oh, that's really important.
Yeah, that's what I took away. And the other thing I took away is there is something that we, as small minded brains as we are, no matter how smart you are, no matter how intelligent, you may understand math, you may understand physics, you may understand, you know, anything. There is something more out there beyond. I don't even want to
Our
call it an astral
our
plane.
rational
Yeah,
our
our
rational
rational
comprehensional.
minds can comprehend, and it's fascinating. Don't get me wrong. So
So it's a very important spiritual experience for you that made you more grateful for the things that mattered in your life.
yeah, and I feel like in doing so, it's rewired my brain to be more emotional when it comes to those things after the fact. I've noticed where, things, we'll say, just watching some sort of video that may not really like emotionally resonate with you before, now emotionally resonates with me, and I get like maybe a little teary-eyed or like, oh yeah, I get it. I can relate to that right
Do you
now.
think you like care about family values more now than you did before almost?
Um
Or is it just like how you live your life, how you feel things changed?
a little bit of both. I still feel like I do things mostly the same way, but I've always tried to be a good, person in that regard. I feel like I don't um how should I explain this? Maybe a little bit, but it's more like,
Your experience in general in life has changed
yeah, yeah,
because of how you emotionally experience it is different
yeah.
now
And
after that experience.
I feel like it's somewhat, I don't even want to say rewired because rewired sounds bad. It has enhanced my brain function to become more emotional in certain situations where normally before I would have been a little bit more stilted and reserved and been like, oh, yeah, whatever. Versus now where it's like, oh, yeah, I get it. I resonate with that.
Oh, do you feel like more uninhibited almost to be unemotion like emotional?
Yeah, in some ways.
I do, I mean, you can disagree if that's not the right word.
Um, it's a little bit more complicated than that, but the best way I can describe it is before, let's say, you watch a video and it may be emotional to you, right? It may resonate to you because, I don't know, a kitten. This is a dumb example, but it's the best way I can describe it. Where like a kitten got rescued and then now has a home, right?
Right.
And where it's like, made to pull on the heartstrings. You go, oh my God, the kitten is so sweet. Before I
Hmm.
would be like, oh yeah, cool, whatever. Kind of partially emotionally detached.
But now it actually affects you,
But
kind of.
now it affects me in a different way than it used to.
Here's the funny thing is that those kinds of videos I actually get irritated by because I'm like, this is obvious emotional manipulation. But then I like cry at the stupidest shit ever.
But that's the thing, right? It but that's what it did for me. And I know plenty plenty of horror stories where this goes wrong. So I wouldn't recommend it. I think you need a certain emotional resiliency and emotional fortitude that not everybody has,
You
right?
know, I think we should maybe, I would love to hear your opinion in another episode, kind of talking about if you want to experiment with this, like what you kind of have to, what kind of person you have to be, and what
Oh
kind of
yeah.
things you need to know to prepare for this.
Yeah.
Because this sounds like the reason why, what I'm hearing is that we both really agree that
Oh yeah,
all
100%.
drugs should be illegal, and we
Yeah.
also believe in like regulation, transparency, proper labeling of all kinds of drugs, even ones that we have accepted ubiquitously, like caffeine and sugar and stuff that is like just in fucking everything and nobody ever tells you. um
the
but
really bad drugs that are really addictive but, are legal. Yeah, it is correct. Yeah.
and there's a lot of, we can argue the semantics of like how to make things legal, what does informed consent mean, because for example, I was put on legal drugs as a child and they very specifically didn't tell me what was in those drugs, and they didn't give me a choice because they wanted to know if those drugs worked. And I personally really feel like that should be not legal. Like I understand like scientifically why they did that, but the that I just feel like that's really like a violation of a child's bodily autonomy, even though I was very sick and I understand that they were trying to help me. I feel like that's a perfect example of just how bad our mental health care system is,
Yeah.
that their only way to treat a child is like, we'll just test them on these various drugs and see how they respond until they have a mental breakdown. That was like very terrible.
Oh God.
So it was really bad. They I kept being like, hey, you can't put me on Ritalin, I'll have a bad time. And then they did that. They
And
put
they
me on
said, "Here's
something
your
in the
Ritalin. Go take it." And
they
you're
put me
like,
on something in the Ritalin family, and I was just like sobbing, being like, I told you not to put me on something like this. And so then when as soon as I had a choice, I stopped taking all of my medication and had a very bad reaction. So that was
yeah,
no good.
that's always not good too. Is just
Well,
cold stopping drugs like that.
but
Anyway,
that's why informed consent and transparency are so important, and why legal versus illegal is so extremely arbitrary, and
yeah.
how important research is for mental health. And I I think that your experience is very enlightening, and I am
I
curious about it. And there are some people that I have other friends who are very into mushrooms, and I'm like very curious about what it is. I'm personally so extremely scared of taking a bad trip because I've had bad experiences on medications, and I've had enlightening, amazing experiences on
well
medications. So,
there
pros and cons.
there's okay. Keep in mind this is way outside of the realm that I would recommend for anybody unless they are, like I said, there's a certain mental fortitude that comes with that.
Well, here's the thing is that I've had such bad reactions to things that normal people have good reactions to. So it doesn't really, to me, just because
Well, there's
something
there's
is,
a scale too. Keep this in mind. There's like
yeah,
microdosing, and I recommend You
I
know,
like that idea too because, for example,
I
I have to cut a lot of my pills in half because of
yeah,
my size,
well, yeah, no, it's great, and I think you know I recommend. I've had a few people, so a few friends, come up to me and was like, "Hey, I'm into mushrooms. I know you have some. This is previously. This isn't currently, but okay, what do I do? Because I've heard people having bad experiences with this." I said, "Okay, well, let's throttle it back. This is what I recommend for you with your because it I hate to say it, but you need to factor in your weight and then, your metabolism and then how much you take. So there's three factors, right?
We've in some medication for children, we adjust dosage by weight, but we don't do that for medication once people are adults. And I
Right?
feel like we should have all dosages based on like body weight and metabolism
Yeah, it's
for all adults,
so
for all
important.
dosages of everything, like alcohol, caffeine, everything to be like this much per body weight is what would be good for your like system. Because like I don't know. Well, I have my friends, him and his wife, they both took mushrooms and they had the same exact dose. So she was too high and he was not nearly high enough.
Yeah,
And he was
yeah,
like,
that'll
this is not a
happen.
good time.
Yeah. And that is important. But beside the fact, all right, we'll do a little recap. Um, and I do have another experience with it. It wasn't quite as crazy or insane as that one, but it's for another day.
Yes, we'll have
I
more
definitely
drug stories. If anybody wants to tell us their drug stories, please let us know and ask for whichever one you want to hear from Eric next. Sorry, Eric, let me
yes.
finish.
Oh no, I got plenty of them. But I think it is important getting the word out there. Um, you know, figuring out what's legal in your area. There are some places where mushrooms are decriminalized. So keep that in mind. I do live in California, so all kinds of fun stuff over here.
I love living on the West Coast.
It's as much as I give you Democrats shit, you guys got some things right.
I mean, that is like one reason you wouldn't want to be in Texas, right?
Uh, there's plenty more reasons why I would want to be in Texas, but anyway,
Although I do have to say, when we're talking about, here's this one last food for thought I have is when we're talking about decriminalizing drugs, we've been talking about psychedelics and other drugs. Here's the one thing is access to testosterone or estrogen for people, just unfettered access. That's those are not technically illegal, but when we're talking about access to drugs, those are things that it's like, well, what level of regulation should those drugs have?
yeah,
Because as is, there's a very high level of regulation on those drugs. When there are some people who are saying, if you have fully informed consent, if you just want to try this drug for 2 weeks and it affects you well, if you are like debating your gender or whatever, just having a small dose of this medication won't change your body, but it would affect your mental ability. Like you'll be less depressed if you are depressed. Like if you are a depressed trans woman, just taking a small dosage of estrogen would mentally make you more happy than you would know more certainly. And if you are, you know, a like if it doesn't work for you, then if
I'll
you're not
stay out of
trans, it
this
might not work.
argument. I'll stay
Well,
out of
I'm
this argument for now.
no, because we don't have to have this discussion, but I'm bringing it up because when you're like, hey, drugs should be, legal and everything should be like open, whatever, these are things that you're like, oh, these should have access barriers for this and that. And I'm like, well, when we're talking about open legalization of drugs and things should have access for everybody and people should have access like free choices for their own bodies, testosterone and estrogen is one of them. So that's
All right.
included to me.
All right. So, bottom line, to summarize, we both agree that drugs should be decriminalized. I think personally, from my own experiences, that we really need to look into more research and development when it comes to, psychedelics, psilocybin specifically, and the mental health issues that plague a lot of us right now.
I agree. I think I'm hearing how much your personal experience with this really helped you and
Yeah,
changed your life for the better.
yeah,
And I agree how much that research would really do as well, and why you're so passionate about this. I totally think it's important. I think my experiences with mental health services and the medication I've been put on is why I push so hard for, like, hey, there needs to be full disclosure, full
yeah,
transparency, and maybe some access barriers. And I understand that there needs to be some nuance given for addicts and not wanting people to become addicts to have too much access. There needs to be some checks and balances in place, but there needs to be, I personally think things should be much more legal. And I don't know that everybody can be cognizant of everything all the time. So there needs to be some safeguards in place so that people can thoughtlessly consume drugs without it being like needing a PhD in drugology or whatever.
Oh, I need to specifically measure down to the micrometer.
Yeah, no, I
Some
don't
shit
want to
like
have to
that.
be my own compounding pharmacy just
Yeah,
for my
it's
own
a little.
medication.
You'd rather go, okay, I'm looking at doing fill in the blank. How much is too much? How much will kill me? How much is fine, right?
Right. Yeah, it should be just like, all right, here's the like safest amount that you're supposed to have, and like you should not, kind of like Tylenol, right? Like you can't buy too much
Yeah,
over the
true.
counter Tylenol at the same time.
Yeah.
I think lots of things can be like that. But thank you guys for listening.
All
I hope
right.
you enjoyed our podcast.
Let us
Have
know
good
if you've had
discussions.
any experience or if you want to join in the conversation at all. We'd love to hear what you guys think.
Have good discussions. See you
Have a
next week.
have a great day.